Today is the first video of a series of videos regarding powerboats. I'm calling it Boats and Yachts. Oh, actually, it's Yachts and Boats 101. To find the right boat for you and to know why it's your boat. We are Matt and Monique, parents to 5 beautiful daughters and 1 dashing son. With 5 of our parental responsibilities out of the house, we made a life-altering decision to sell everything and set out on a journey of a lifetime with our youngest daughter and her dog Guidos. Our journey would take us from Sacramento to San Francisco, then to Mexico. From Mexico, we would continue on to Panama, through the canal, and then to Florida to begin America's Great Loop. We began this journey on January of 2022, but with several hiccups and delays, we only made it to Ensenada, Mexico. We anticipated beginning the 2022 Mexican cruising season on December 10th, but on November 26th, a serious infection would derail our plans with a month hospitalization and 6 months of medical treatment. Our journey will have to wait until the 2023 cruising season. Until then, we will share our knowledge and experiences and show how we will continue to improve our skills, the condition of the boat, and how we provision for the longest journey we have ever made. Basically, what we're going to be looking at are the different types of powerboats that are available and some of the reasons why they may be the boat for you and not the boat that you might be falling in love with because it looks good. All right, so let us get started. Yachts versus boats. Are we talking boats? Are we talking yachts? And what's the difference between the two? Well, I looked it up, and according to the internet, and of course, if it's on the internet, you know it's got to be true. A yacht is a larger recreational boat, usually over 10 meters or 33 feet, mostly used for pleasure. And a boat is a smaller vessel of any size used for fishing and sailing. Well, for me, that's a bunch of hogwash. No one is coming onto my boat and calling it a yacht, and it's 50 feet long. But the same size Fleming would certainly be called a yacht. So when it comes right down to it, a yacht and a boat, the difference between a yacht and a boat is the actual purpose of the vessel. A boat is for fun, and a yacht is to impress. And of course, that's my definition. And if it's my definition, I think we all can understand it's true. So when we're looking at the purpose of a boat, we want to be honest with ourselves. What are we really going to do with this boat? You can be on the intercoastal rivers, like the Sacramento River, where it's always smooth, and buy a great big ocean-going yacht, or you can be on the ocean and get a speedboat, like a Malibu or a Ski Supreme. Those aren't really the proper purposes for those boats. So we have to be honest. Are we going to be on open oceans? Are we going to be doing intercoastal cruising, inland water cruising like lakes or rivers or marinas? Do you plan on doing the Great Loop? Transatlantic cruise from the East Coast to Europe. Perhaps you might even want to go to the South Pacific. Although that might require a sailboat, there are some power boats, and with a little fuel management, many power boats can make it to the South Pacific. Are you planning on doing overnight cruises or long voyages? Or maybe you're just thinking that you want to do weekend cruises or booze cruises or maybe even overnight cruises. You have to be honest because every boat's going to be different. Style does meet function. The hull design, it really is the definitive question, and we will get into that. The length of your boat. Do you really need a 60-foot boat when a 30-foot boat would be perfectly fine? What about power options? There's a big difference between gas engines and diesel engines, and even in diesel engines, a Detroit is much different than a Volvo. So we wanted to look at some of those considerations, or you have to be prepared to ask those questions. Constructions, the construction. Do you want the easy construction I have here? That means do you want it to be easy to take care of? No wood, everything's plastic. There's no or very little maintenance. Or do you want a beautiful boat with fine mahogany, glossy varnish? For me, wood boats are the most beautiful vessels on the water, and I would love to have a wood boat. However, we'll get into that. And then, of course, the age of the boat. There are some benefits to buying an older boat, and then there are advantages to buying a newer boat. And so those are considerations that you have to be honest with. Do you really want to spend the extra money to buy a newer boat, or do you want to have the hull rigidity of an old boat? Styles of boats. And the style of a boat really defines the function, kind of. And let's talk about that. Here are some of the searching styles of boats that you may be interested in. Sport fishers or convertibles, the express cruiser or down easters. You have aft cabins, which are also called tri-cabins, the pilot houses, long-range cruisers, and trawlers. We'll touch on these during this series of videos. The long-range cruiser and the trawlers really can be folded into any of these other styles of boats. So if you're interested in, say, a sport fisher or the convertibles, but you want to go long distances, we're going to look at, say, the long-range cruiser and see if we can mix those two elements together. And if it is possible, what is the cost? Because cost is the ultimate question here. If you have all the money in the world, you're watching the wrong video. And if you have all the money in the world, give me a call. I'll find you the right boat. So the hull truth, the definitive law of cruising. More important than the style of your boat is the hull design. There are basically three different types of hulls. There's the planing hull, there's the semi-displaced hull, and there's the full displacement hull. It's very important to understand what the difference is when you're looking for your next boat. The planing hull, which I'm going to call here the Go Fast hull, has two variations. The deep V planing hull, which was made popular by the manufacturer Bertram, with their, it was called a Moppy. It's a very deep hull that pierces the water all the way from the bow to the stern. It makes for an extremely comfortable ride as long as you're going into the sea. Very, very tough, and that's what made Bertram a great sport fishing boat. However, they're not the most fuel efficient hull design. So they went to what's called the modified DV planing hull. And you can see here that it has less of a draft, and the stern of the boat is it will flatten out. So the front of the boat is in a very sharp V configuration, but as it moves back, the bottom will flatten out towards the stern, which enables it to plane a lot easier. Unfortunately, because of the flat bottom in the back, there are times when it will become very rough. It'll slap in the water instead of piercing with that deep V. The fully displaced hull looks like a big whale. Everything's round. It's got a keel that runs from the bow all the way to the stern. What happens here is instead of riding on top of the water, which is what a planing hull will do, it actually will displace the water. It will move the water out of its way. And so the rounded hull provides a surface for the water to fall behind it. It is the most efficient design available, and obviously God knew what he was doing, because like I said, it looks like a whale. You'll find fully displaced hulls on long-range cruisers and a lot of trawlers, because they're just going to have farther distances to go. The next hull, which is probably the most reasonable hull, is the semi-displaced hull. This takes the elements of both the planing hull and the fully displaced hull and puts them together so you can do both. You can actually displace water, or you can get out of the water and plane and go fast. And you'll see by this drawing here, there is a roundness to the front of the boat, and as you move aft, the bottom will flatten out. But there is a deep keel that runs from about the three-fourths of the way down, all the way down to the back of the boat, and that maintains directional flow for the boat, and won't veer off course. But that flat bottom will enable the boat to actually get out of the water once enough horsepower is applied to the props. So when we're looking at the fully displaced hull, no matter how much power you have on the boat, the faster the boat goes, the deeper the bow will fall into the water. It will dig into the water, making for an absolutely horrible fuel mileage. But it never will get out of the water because of that rounded bottom. It's like a ball in the water. However, with a semi-displaced hull, once the bow wake reaches the stern of the boat and gets behind the flat part of the stern, that boat has something to lift out of the water, and will be able to reach speeds of 20, 30, well, maybe not 30 knots, but 20 knots. Now, the drawback is the semi-displaced hull is not as efficient as the fully displaced hull, and it's not as efficient in speed as the planing hull. So it is a compromise, but you're able to do both. So for many types of cruising, the semi-displaced hull is probably the best bet. It would have been my go-to hull for the Great Loop if that's all we were planning on doing, because there are times when you want to go fast and times when you really want to be as efficient as possible.
I smell that smell of freedom, baby.
One of the things that is important to understand with these hulls is, with the planing hull, these boats are going to have larger engines but smaller fuel tanks. And that is in order to get as much horsepower into the water and make them as light as possible. These aren't long-range cruising boats. They are fast, get to your destination, and do whatever's comfortable. With the fully displaced hull, now these are going to have small engines, because all they have to do is push the boat through the water. And because of the hull design, there really doesn't need to be a great deal of horsepower, because the bottom of the boat is designed to just slip right through the water. As it displaces, it doesn't take a great deal of horsepower to move the boat forward. That's going to enable the boat to have larger fuel tanks, larger water tanks, and thereby allow the boat to have a longer cruising destination. It's going to take you a long time to get there, but you're going to be able to go much further and stay much longer. Again, the semi-displaced hull is going to be a mixture between the two. The engines are going to be a bit smaller than the planing hull, but they're going to be much bigger than the displacement hull. For example, my Hatteras 48 motor yacht, which was a semi-displaced hull, it had 6V92s with 430 horsepower per engine. That boat at plane would get to 18 to 19 knots. But at displacement speed, which was about 9 knots, I would burn approximately 3.5 gallons per hour. That's pretty good. It had 590 gallons of fuel. That's going to get me somewhere around 700 miles without a fuel up. It had 150 gallons worth of water, and it was perfect. I looked at a boat in Michigan, a 48-foot Viking, which was a beautiful boat. And this boat was planing. It had a planing hull. Same design, basically. But the hull was a planing hull. It was built for speed, and that boat was fast. It had 8V92s. I think they had 720 horsepower apiece. The turbochargers obviously were bigger. And the boat did 32 knots. It was a fast boat. So my quick physics lesson is displacement hulls move through the water while planing hulls move on top of the water. By reducing the drag of the water, the planing hull can go much faster. It can be considered a hard and fast rule. So to calculate hull speed, hull speed is equal to 1.34. Oh, jeez. So, if you don't, I've got one person next to me polishing his stainless steel with a machine, and now I've got the Love Boat blowing its horn because it's leaving. All right, I think they're done. Although the guy next door to me is still polishing. So hull speed is equal to 1.34 times the square root of the water line. And the water line is in feet. For example, my boat is 48 feet overall. Its water line is 43 feet long. So we take 43 feet, well, if we take 1.34 and square root 43 feet, you're going to find that the hull speed is 8.79 knots, 8.8 knots. That's going to be the highest speed at efficient consumption. What happens if we exceed that speed? Well, for the fully displaced hull, the bow will begin to dig into the water, creating another layer of inefficiency. Because of its round bottom, the boat will never lift out of the water. The bow will simply dig deeper and deeper into the water. For the semi-displaced hull, the power of the boat will eventually move the bow wake aft, where the boat's bottom becomes flat and cause upward pressure to push the boat out of the water, similar to the planing hull. The same principles of hull speed apply to planing hulls as displacement hulls. However, planing hulls are designed to run more efficiently while planing over the water. These hulls are therefore designed with chines that run the length of the boat from bow to stern. Here's another example of a planing hull. This is a planing hull. You can see the hard chines all the way down the boat. And if we look directly at the front of the boat, if I can, you can see it's uniform all the way down. These chines, or steps, create upward pressure on the boat to get the boat out of the water as soon as possible. So you will find on a planing hull that it will begin planing. It will begin lifting out of the water, sometimes before it even reaches its optimum hull speed, because of the hard chines that have been designed to lift the boat out of the water. So if you've ever wondered why sailboats and trawlers bitch about sport fishers and sea rays passing them at high speed, it's because these boats are crap at low speed. When that boat it has begun to lift out of the water, the bow of the boat comes out first. And now it's very hard to control or to steer. For example, a 40-foot sea ray with a water line of approximately 36 feet is going to have a hull speed of about 8 knots, which is 1.34 times the square root of 36 feet. If that boat was going to pass, say, our boat, which has a hull speed, a displaced hull speed of 8.8 knots. So let's say this boat is doing 8 knots. The sea ray will have to pass the Hatteras at a speed above 8 knots. That would require the sea ray to exceed the hull speed of its boat, which will require or force the boat to begin to plane. And that means the boat will start coming out of the water. The bow will start coming out of the water. And once the bow starts coming out of the water, it begins to plow. And that plowing is going to create even larger wakes and become very inefficient. So as the sea ray makes what would be assumed a safe pass, which would be a slow pass, his slow pass has created a condition that requires him to create a large wake, which is not going to be received pleasantly by the captain that is being passed. If we look at the semi-displaced hull, the semi-displaced hull will behave similarly to that of the fully displaced hull. As the boat exceeds its hull speed, the bow begins to dig into the water, just as the fully displaced hull, which is different, completely different than the planing hull. Remember, the planing hull will begin to rise out of the water as it exceeds its hull speed. The semi-displaced boat will begin to dig into the water. The semi-displaced hull, because it's digging into the water, will have much more control at slightly higher speeds than its hull speed. But where this fully displaced boat has small engines, the semi-displaced hull with its larger engines allow it to overpower the constraints of its bow wake. Once the bow wake moves after the hull, the semi-displaced flat bottom with its hard chines applied upward pressure. This will allow the hull to come out of the water and begin planing. Perhaps not as efficiently as the planing hull, but far greater than the displaced hull. While the semi-displaced hull can do all, it doesn't do any of it efficiently, which I've already said. It is not as efficient as a fully displaced hull, and it does not plane as efficiently as the planing hull. But it does do all, and it does it comfortably. As you search for your boat, or as you stay with me to the following videos, keep these basic laws in mind. How fast are you going to want to go? How efficiently do you want to run? Because you can apply these basic hull designs to many of the style of boats that we're going to look at. And once you're at the dock, the style of boat is going to be more important than the actual physics of the bottom, because you live on the interior of the boat, not the bottom of the boat. So thank you for spending your time with me this afternoon, or this morning, or whatever it might be where you are. If you found any of this helpful, I'd appreciate it if you gave me a like and think about subscribing. I have some additional information that I'm going to provide you over the next few weeks, including applying these different theories to actual boats that are available on the market. We'll also go into areas that are very important to the boat, such as toilets, electrical, electronics, navigation. We're going to go through many of the things that I considered and still continue to consider on this boat in order to make our very long cruise. So I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, keep your boat afloat.